You might be thinking that the Windows 10 powered 2017 Surface Pro is basically the Surface Pro 5. It came after the Surface Pro 4, right? Well, if Microsoft has anything to say about it, you'd be dead wrong. As of right now, there's no such thing as a Surface Pro 5, as Microsoft Surface-led Panos Panay confirmed last year. However, he did say that it would exist just as soon as there were more radical changes from the Microsoft Hardware Design Lab, and we've heard rumors that a redesigned Surface Pro is on its way in 2019. Could this be the elusive Surface Pro 5? If so, we can't wait to see what it'll look like. Just like the Surface Pro released back in June 2017, the Surface Pro 5 could be just around the corner, but you can never be sure. And, even though the new and improved 2017 Surface Pro gave us better battery life and an improved Surface Pen, it apparently wasn't enough to call it the Surface Pro 5, which leads us to wonder, what would be enough?
Number 1. Surface Pro 5 release date. 2 years ago, we were convinced we would see the Surface Pro 5 as early as last year. A prophecy that wasn't exactly fulfilled by the time we did see another Surface Pro in May 2017. As much hearsay that had reached our offices at the time. You would have expected a full-fledged Surface Pro 4 sequel, but instead what we received was more of refresh. At a Microsoft event that took place in Shanghai, China, the Surface Pro was unveiled in front of the whole world, though its improvements weren't as revolutionary as we had anticipated before. In other words, the spec boost was nice, but not as nice as it would have been to get a pair of Thunderbolt 3 ports for external graphics. As such, we're convinced that the Surface Pro 5 is still on its way. Now that Windows 10 is finally the most popular of Microsoft's desktop operating systems and Microsoft is racking up those numbers, it'll be interesting to see a tablet that's home to only the latest and greatest software. And, after the somewhat underwhelming Windows 10 April 2018 update, we're hoping to hear more rumors about the Surface Pro 5 now that Redstone 5 is being tested. We've also heard rumors that a heavily redesigned Surface Pro is going to be releasing in mid-2019. This could end up being the long-awaited Surface Pro 5, as long as this heavy redesign is enough to actually deserve the higher number. We'll just have to wait and see.
Number 2. Surface Pro 5 price. Historically, Surface pricing rarely fluctuates with each new variation. At the Shanghai event on the 23rd of May, the Surface Pro was revealed to come with a $799 price in the US or £799 in the UK. That's around or $1,380 for the entry-level model. If the Surface Pro 5 is indeed the Surface Pro, then we now know for sure what the price will be. But, if the Surface Pro 5 is the would-be successor to the Surface Pro, then maybe we can expect a higher price tag. While it wouldn't be ideal for Microsoft's loyal following if the company deviated too far from the norm, ambitious upgrades may necessitate that it does. For the price of the next Surface Pro to differ from its predecessors, it would have to offer some serious advantages over its last-gen sibling, not just a run-of-the-mill spec boost. Should the Surface Pro 5 team take any hints from the Surface Book 2, it's possible that Microsoft's next tablet will come in 2 different screen size variants, at 2 different starting prices. Considering Apple offers both a 10.5-inch and 12.9-inch iPad Pro, it would make sense for the Surface Pro 5 to get with the program and introduce a smaller option as well.
Number 3. Surface Pro 5 spec. As it stands right now, the Surface Pro has some major catching up to do when it comes to specs. Just 2 months after it released, Intel announced its 8th generation ultrabook processors, which are quad-core at the most affordable level. The 2017 Surface Pro, however, only has a dual-core 7th generation Intel processor regardless of how much cash you throw at it. So, when a Surface Pro 5 does arrive, realistically would like to see an Intel Core i5-8250U to start with, more expensive editions allowing for an Intel Core i7-8550U. But now that Intel has announced a wide range of Coffee Lake U-series CPUs, we would much rather see the Surface Pro 5 come to the current CPU generation. Though as much as would like to see the death of the entry-level Core M3 Surface Pro, it's unlikely to take place with the Surface Pro, especially seeing as Microsoft's other Surface devices have only recently begun to adopt it for the first time. Port-wise, for the time being, the Surface Connect proprietary charger is here to stay, meaning the latest Surface Pro, and presumably the Surface Pro 5 don't use USB Type-C for charging or data transfers. That said, this is bound to change given that the Surface Book 2 does offer native support for USB-C.
Number 4. Surface Pro 5 design. Ahead of its announcement, a leak published by VentureBeat showed off a number of press renders that claimed to be of the Surface Pro 4's successor. As it turns out, that was only half true. These designs ended up representing the Surface Pro rather than a true Surface Pro 5. Those who were hoping for an intense overhaul of the Surface Pro 4's appearance had a rude awakening with the Surface Pro. But now that we've seen speculation that a completely redesigned Surface Pro is coming next year, there's reason to hope again.
Number 5. Surface Pro 5 Stylus and Dial. One can't help but wonder how Microsoft will go about refreshing Surface Pen this time around. A next-generation Surface Pen is an idea we've contemplated for quite some time. But it wasn't until Microsoft itself patented haptic feedback technology for the Surface Pen that we saw a clearer picture of what's to come. Without divulging too many drab details, the patent suggests a stylus whose tip retracts when it's pressed against a flat surface, such as a screen per SE Acute. From there, a coil will be compacted and subsequently vibrate from within the pen's chassis. It's an idea that Apple has been toying with for years, but has yet to integrate into its existing pencil stylus. As such, it's now more evident than ever that Microsoft wants to beat its Cupertino rival to the punch. Another Surface Pen patent describes a retention clip that can emulate the functions of a mouse's scroll wheel, perhaps indicating that the Surface Pro 5 won't need a mouse or a trackpad at all. This would come in handy for those users who desire the creative benefits of the Surface Pen, but would prefer not to shell out the cash for a physical keyboard. Of course, Microsoft also has the Surface Dial in its clasp. The designer-focused, puck-like accessory was briefly mentioned in a slideshow presentation in December, with ZDNet having picked up the slides itself for use in a news story. The company claims that peripherals such as the dial, wearables, headsets and more are factors essential to what is perceived as a modern PC. Also mentioned was the incorporation of hero features, such as Cortana and Windows Hello. And although a fingerprint scanner didn't make it into the new Surface Pro itself, there is an optional type cover that includes this functionality. With that in mind, we can surmise that, if or when a Surface Pro 5 is announced, it will also support fingerprint recognition.